We're buying land and we're building apartment complexes. And the end goal is always to get into multi-unit real estate. Hands down. One, tax incentives are unbelievable because you can cost segregate and depreciate the asset on long-term holds. Super advantageous. But one of the biggest things is the cash flow. Most people just need the cash flow. They need money. And so one of the biggest things is, how do you find land? When you find land, how do you know that that land is going to be tangible for financial return? And what is that land going to be used for? So I'm going to give you an example of a lot I just finished tying up, and we actually have in the process of entitlement. And I'll explain to you what the process of this entitlement looks like and what we're doing. And then we'll go through the underwriting and how the asset is actually taken down from start to finish. Now, this lot right here was for sale, and I went in and I didn't care about the retail. Okay, there's two components here. There was an office component here. There's an office component that's right here. Okay, this office component was adding 500,000, like 490,000. We'll call it 500K to the price. Okay, now, not worth the price for this retail. And the reason why it's not worth the price for this retail is because how it cash flows in the age of the building. And if it's a single tenant occupancy, there's one veterinarian place in here. And if they lose that tenant, the real estate is like 80 years old. It's not worth what it's selling for. Now, there's a small unit that's available right here. And then there's a little barber shop that they said is in and out, all right? So that's why I say there's one tenant, because the barber shop is there sometimes it's not. Now, when we go in, so what I looked at is I looked at this land that was right back here. This land actually comes up to right here. Okay, now there's a fence that's right here. So you think that the lot is right here. But this back lot right here is equivalent to 1.2 acres. 1.2 acres. Okay, so we went back in, and this is also zoned commercial zoning. This is zoned commercial zoning. So this has to change to be able to go in and become multi-unit real estate. Now, every commercial property has a residential component to it, every single one of them. So when we go in and we're looking at this, when I find this land, I'm sitting back and literally there's a restaurant that's sitting right here. And my wife and I drove out, and when we drove past this facility right here and we saw a little for sale sign, we just called on it. And when I found out this had all this vacant land, this used to be a car wash right here. I love old car wash locations, the old self-serve car washes. All that's there now is just a slab. So we came in, I landed up making a call. First, we called the broker and we said, hey, what is this zone for? And he said, well, it's C1, okay? It's commercial use. It had a car wash on it. You can go out and build a commercial building on it. We don't want a commercial building. So I said, what's the story with the front one? They told us we would sell that separate. That ain't the case. The sellers actually want to sell that along with this back unit, but we didn't want this section here. The land up front, they had it for sale for 400 grand for the land. Now, we're sitting back and thinking, well, what can we do with this? And obviously, what I want to do is build multifamily on it. There's a rail station right here that runs all the way to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Very, very nice area. And the mountain views right here are awesome. You know, beautiful mountain views in here. Okay, so there's views for days. And it looks like an old West hacienda style type property. So when we go in, I said, okay, let's do this higher end. Now, we haven't run pro formas. We haven't run comps. We don't even know if this thing's going to work, right? My brain's just working. So then I sit back and follow the trend of my brain here, guys, because you have to understand that the information is in the story, because I'm going through the methodical step-by-step process that I took when I went in and I was assessing this land for purchase and actual use to see if I even want it, right? And so my brain's sitting back going, how cool would it be to do an apartment complex where we did something where we did a building over here, and let's say we could get 30 units in here, okay? Let's just do a 2-story, and I want to charge higher rents, okay? Now, initially, I was sitting back just going, okay, what are fair market value rents? So I went in and I started looking at fair market value rents in this lower than pronounced financially economic area, right? It's an older area, definitely lower economic area, but it's in the bypass of going towards Santa Fe, which is a very affluent area. It's on the bypass of going to Rio Rancho. It's an area that sits in the top 3 areas in the country that have the best schooling systems because of Intel. And so we sit back and I'm evaluating it based on where it sits. And you have to bypass through here. So when I came through here, originally I thought, okay, well, let me just build my normal business model at first, right? And I'll just build something, economical that fits the area. And so when I came through and I started looking at this, I went down, there was an apartment complex that had just finished construction, 12 units, and I looked at the rent rates on there. And I said, holy shit, I can't even afford to build. I don't even know how the people that have the other apartment complex even stabilizing that thing for profit. And so I sat back and I said, you know what? We have to do higher end. Like, there is no option. If we can't do higher end, then we can't build it. So I went in, I started looking at the demographics of where this thing sat and how it looked. Now, there's a little bit of higher risk in something like this because there's nothing that proves concept. There's no proof of concept in the area at all. But you have to think about it from what you've done in the past. And a lot of people haven't done stuff in the past. So I started thinking about it based on subdivisions and work that I've done in this area in the past. I said, you know what? One thing that I know is that less than a mile away, there's homes that are over $1 million. Every single home in that subdivision is over $1 million. And then I know that across the highway where I'm already building, there's homes, and we service a massive demographics of empty nesters and retirees. And most of these people, the vast majority of them, over 90% of them, come from out of state. And so they want a safe area to live. This area is a safe area to live. It doesn't have a lot of economics to it, but it's a bypass area, and it actually is a nice, quaint area. Then I find out that there's another restaurant that's opening up here down the road that's coming in from a more affluent area. It's a higher end restaurant. And so I sit back and I go, okay, let's talk to the economic development team and see what we need. So I went in and we go and do an informal outreach to the economic development team, just informal. And we asked them to please invite the planning and zoning department along with us. And so we go in and we talk to the economic development team, and they're a lot less sophisticated because of the small size municipality that this is. And so it's very easy to just sit down and have a across the table conversation with these folks. And we ask them, look, this land is well over 100 years old of development, right? And around it was the old Route 66. And there was a lot of trade that went on back in the early 1900s and the late 1800s that happened along this corridor. And so it has that Old West feel, right? With the horses, the wagons, and that Old West feel still to it. It has all the feed stores, but then there's a post office, there's a clinic, there's a fire department, there's a police station, there's restaurants. All of what you need in a community is right here within walking distance of this property, including public transit that goes out to Santa Fe, and it has a beautiful hacienda style feel to it. So I said, okay, they are willing to support the development because they love the development, because not a lot of development's going on in this sector of town. And so the support is there. First, the outreach. Second, do they support it? So we do an outreach, we explain to them what we're doing. Now, in addition to that, we sit back and go, yeah, they love the concept. So now we come in and we say yes to the concept, yes to the support. And okay, so this is concept, this is to the support. Now, can we make it viable? So I started looking around and I said, okay, I'm going to underwrite this thing as though it's kind of halfway between more affluent and lower end. Okay, so I get this median underwriting. So one thing that I know is that properties that are 2 bed, 2 baths are underwriting at about $1,650 per month. Okay, I can't get this product to pencil at that, barely. So I know that affluent stuff is sitting right around $2,400 a month for 2s. Okay, this one I'm going to strive to get. But if I fall short and all I get is $2,000 a month, I'm going to be okay. We'll look at that here in just a moment. So this is market in this area. This is high end. This is average. Median. Okay, so this is what I underwrite as, because this is going to be my worst case scenario here, is this $2,000 a month. Okay, does it work at $2,000 a month, and can I afford to build this product? Okay, now I have to sit back and think, what is the cost to build? And first, what am I going to build? And two, what is the cost to build the product that I really want to build? And how do I get this? Like, how do I achieve $2,000 a month? Because see, these $1,650 per month units, these things are sitting right at 920 square feet, okay, for 2s. Okay, these ones are sitting closer to about 1,200 square feet. Okay, so I sit back and go, okay, how do I achieve what I need right here? So if I really want to get this right here, and I want that $2,400 a month rent, but I'm going to underwrite it at $2,000, I have to build these things bigger. They have to feel like condominiums. They have to feel like lofts. They have to feel like a home. And that's the biggest variables. They have to feel like a home. They have to feel like a place somebody wants to live, and it feels more homely as opposed to an apartment complex, because otherwise someone's just going to go out and rent a house, or they're just going to go out and rent something more cost effective if they don't have the amenities. Now, I don't have the room on this lot to put swimming pools. I don't have room on this lot to put high-end amenities. So what type of amenities do I have to give to people in order for them to want to live in this facility? So I have to sit back and I think, okay, what can we offer these people? Okay, now, one thing, what do retirees want? You know, a lot of them, they do want social programs and pools and stuff like that, potentially. But I can't give them that. But what I can give them is I can give them space, okay? Now, inside and outside, I can give them a bigger unit that feels more like a home, okay? So if somebody's coming out of a 2,500 square foot home, 3,000 square foot home, maybe it's just now a husband and wife, and they just don't want the space, but they want it to feel like it's still their own home, I can give them more space in the interior and exterior. Okay, I can give them walking trails. Now, there's a piece of land right here that's owned by the town, and it gives me an extra 10 feet right here. Now, this 10 feet is part of the walking trail that goes to this train station right here. But the city, if I support them, I asked them, I said, hey, this is the ugliest walking trail I've ever seen in my life. It has old ass railroad ties, no improvements. It looks like shit, plain and simple. And I said, what if I took possession of this, not ownership, just possession of it for development purposes only, okay? So now I just increased my entire lot by 10 feet. Now, here's the thing. I didn't want this over here, but now I have to do a parking agreement with these guys. And when I go in to put an offer, I first put an offer in on the land right here. I didn't put an offer in on this. I put a contingency and a first right of refusal to purchase this down the road. They came back, ignored my offer, and I called the broker. I said, what's the deal? Why are these guys ignoring my offer? I gave them full price offer on their land, you know? And they go, well, they now decided they do want to sell the office with it. So I scratched my head and go, okay, I don't really want this piece of shit building. So I had to think about it for a minute. Now here's where creativity comes in. I said, okay, what if I left this veterinarian clinic here? I took this and I did this like a clubhouse and I turned this into an amenity for this over here. And what if we could do stuff where we have living space and I put some patio covers and stuff on this and I turn this into an actual amenity and like a clubhouse over here, okay? And I took possession of this walking area and we did walking trails. Now we have views for days right here, views for days. These are beautiful, gorgeous mountain views. I mean, you can't beat these mountain views. So I sit back and say, okay, space, walking trails, waterfalls, just little quaint ones. So I said, okay, we do this. We come in, we do a building. Let's do it hacienda style. Let's do a little courtyard, big mission style gateway. And then we could do parking out here around the sides of it. And we have plenty of parking space out here, but we still have walking trails. And what if we cut these in and we did these big open patios on the back, but they took advantage of all these views. So all these had views, all these had views, all these had views. Everything in the back had view. 100% of every unit had views of the mountains. And this old hacienda style where there was still open fields of grain and pasture grasses, horses and cows. And then I said, you know, what if we did if we made our parking spaces feel hacienda style where you actually could still go in, ride a horse up to this property, tie the horse up to one of the parking stalls and made this thing really feel like old hacienda style. And instead of doing a 3-story build, which we did traditionally, we do a 2-story build that's just walk up and we did these units 1,200 square feet to match what the higher rents are getting. Now we got something here. We come into the courtyard, we do a little water feature right here, and we do all these cool little sitting areas, walking trails, and even a little bit of natural grasses. And now this thing feels like a resort. So now we're doing this resort style build that's all hacienda style, okay? So just think about I'm going to go in, I'm going to live in the Old West. I'm going to go in and live in this nice, cool, quaint feeling property where I have the dormer windows, the light coming in, facing the mountains. You get the mountain sun coming over every single morning on the east, and you have these feel of quaint living, right? And so now I'm sitting back going, okay, how about 55 plus? And we do this in active living adult community. Now, when we did it, we landed up pushing the density to 30. But because I'm getting the land at such a good price, I sat back and said, okay, what if we go in and we just take it down to 28 unit, okay? Now, density always wins. Density always wins. But in spite of density winning, I sat back and said, what if I can give these guys a rooftop grill area with a patio cover up on top where they have living space up here? And all it does is compromises one unit. And so we go in and I give them this hacienda style pergola up here where we do a barbecue grill. But we don't only do it there, we do one over here. And now we do these living pergolas. When you walk up to the second floor, and now you can go barbecue up there. You could hang out. You do the wicker furniture up on top with the cushions on there, barbecue grill, pergola, so you could sit out there. And now we have 2 grilling areas with only 28 tenants in here. And now you have hacienda style living with mountain views. And it adds an architectural component with the pergola overtaking the side. So this thing actually looks really cool where it overhangs the side of the property. So when you look at it from the front, it has this resort style feel to it. And all it is stick lumber overlooking the dwelling. And so I said, that's what we're doing. We're going to make this thing feel like it's resort style with that overhang and the patio covers. So now we sit back and we go in and we start entertaining this with the city, okay? And we don't know if we have the density yet, but we make it based on a 24 unit minimum density, okay? We land up with 28 units underwriting at $2,000 per month rent, okay? Now, we know this product's going to cost us a little bit more to build because we're going to use more expensive windows. We want them to have that green or blue feel to them, or that red feel to them that old hacienda style has, where they used to paint the window trims blue or green or red back in the day. But now we want to do it with vinyl where it has that feel, but it has longevity to it. And so we go in, we use windows by Anderson because we know they're the most inexpensive vinyl windows that have color to them. So we go in and we start pricing out this cost to build, okay? So let's look at it real quick. I want you guys to understand two variables on here. There's the cost to build and the value of the asset. If you can't stabilize the asset based on the cost to build, you can't build it. So now I sit back and I say, okay, now I have to look at it from a financial perspective. Now, let's go in, guys, and I'm going to clear this out. Okay, now, what do we know? We know we have 28 units, and part of that 28 units, we're going to do these at $2,000 per month, okay? Now, we ultimately want 2,400, so I'm going to underwrite the potential. Okay, so now we got 28 times 2,000, okay? That's 56,000 times 12, okay? Just 12 months in a year. So times 12, that's going to equal $672,000. And this is my gross income potential, okay? My GIP. Now, let's say that we only keep this thing 95% rented. There's always a 5% revolution in multifamily. So we multiply this times 95%, okay? So we take this times 0.95. That's 638,400, okay? So our gross operating income is going to be equivalent to 638K, okay? Now, this right here is our gross operating income based on occupancy. Now, if we go in and let's say that this property is not going to cost a lot to be able to maintain because we're going to landscape it correctly from the beginning. We're going to go in, we're going to put weed fabric down, we're going to put low maintenance plants and trees in there, automated irrigation in it, and it's going to have to be blown, cleaned, and maintained very modestly, but the property is also small. It's only 1.15 acres, okay? Now, there's no swimming pools, there's no common area in regards to like under air conditioners and stuff. So what CBRE has told us, along with Cushman and Wakefield and multiple large brokers and property management companies, is that assets like this typically cost about 19% annualized to run with expenses, property tax expenses, insurance expenses, and maintenance expenses, and upkeep. It's usually 19%. So we opt to go a little bit more conservative and say, let's give it off to a property management company. Let's say we're not self-managing, and let's say that our expenses over time, we need to be able to put towards capital expenses, meaning that if a roof needs replacement 15 years from now, we have that money set aside. So let's function on a 25% expense ratio, okay? So if we go in and we say 638,000 times 25% expenses, we're looking for our net operating income. Net operating income is GOI minus expenses, okay? So we're going to go in here. This is our GOI minus expenses. Okay, now, so we're going to take 25% times 0.25. That's $159,000 in expenses, okay? So we're going to have, let's say, $160K in expenses. Now, we go in and our NOI lands up being 638 minus 160. That's going to give us $478,000. So our NOI equals $478,000, 478. Okay, now value equals NOI divided by cap rate. Okay, now here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. This is where market conditions affect values. And we have to understand what market conditions do to values and what type of downward pressure market conditions have on values. So we're sitting back and interest rates went extremely low. We could do a HUD loan, but if I do a HUD loan, I know it's going to add $100,000 to my bill cost. So we'll underwrite it both ways. Let's look at it from a debt service perspective, okay? So banks are looking at this at a 6.5% debt ratio, okay? Almost all banks across the board right now. Interest rates haven't went down. We can go in, we can get an interest rate of 7.5%, do a buy down, do a 6.5% interest rate ratio. And if we do that, our cap rate has to be equivalent to our interest rate. Otherwise, we can't pay the mortgage. So let's underwrite this two ways, okay? And then we're going to do the cost to build based on the value. Now, our NOI is $478K. Now, if we go in and we do this on a debt ratio of 6.5%, our value is going to be, so 478 divided by 0.065, that gives us a value of $7.35 million, okay, based on this 6.5% debt ratio. Now, with HUD, it's going to cost us more. We're going to spend over $100,000 getting a HUD loan. Now, it's only worth it if we're going to go in and we're going to hold this property for at least a year. So let's look at the difference if we underwrite this at a 5% debt ratio, because one thing that we know about HUD right now is we can get into a HUD loan for about 5.5%, buy down the interest rate to about 4.5%, but let's underwrite it at a 5% debt ratio based on HUD. So if we go in and we take this exact same number and we look at it from a 5% debt ratio, we take the exact same revenue, 478, and now we take that 478 times divided by 0.05. Okay, 9.56. Now we have a value of $9.56 million. Okay, we could stabilize this on a 35-year stabilized note right here with HUD. Okay, there's some early payout penalties, but most loans are going to have them anyways. So based on same revenue, just a different debt ratio, there's over $2 million bottom line valuation variance. Okay, it's going to cost us $100,000 to stabilize this HUD. Now let's look at this from an underwriting perspective related to cost to build. Okay, so this is our value right here based on either one of these variables. Okay, now let's take a look at what our cost to build is and see what we need to do to make this work. So let's go in and let's do cost to build. Okay, now we got 28 units. Each unit is going to be different. Okay, we're going to do some 1-bedrooms, we're going to do some 2-bedrooms, but we're going to do vast majority of them 2-bedrooms. Because of the demographical area, we know that the 2-bedrooms are going to rent better. So now let's take a look at it from a perspective of 1s and 2s. Okay, and so we know that the balance of rents are going to be an average mean of $2,000 per month. But let's say, for sake of example, we have some units that are 1,250 square feet. Okay, so let's do 20 units. Let's do 20 times 1,250 square feet. And then let's do some 1-bedroom units. And let's do 8 units times 900 square foot 1-bedroom units. Okay, now if we go in and we multiply these for our cost to build, we're going to go in and say 20 times 1,250. Okay, that's going to give us 25,000 square feet. Now that's abbreviation for square feet. We're going to go and do 8 times 900. That's going to be 7,200 square feet. Okay, we're going to add these up. So plus 25,000, that's going to be 32,200 square feet. Okay, now these are going to cost us a little bit more to build because they're a little bit nicer units. Now, one of the things that I love most about small multifamily is that you could build it at a very fair market rate, $140 a square foot on average. We just had one of our running a build down in Little Rock, Arkansas, where a gentleman in our Build Wealth community named Bruno just finished building at $121 a square foot. Beautiful product, all brick on the outside, gorgeous trim out. Now, labor rates down in the south are a little bit less than they are in the north and the west side of the country, but in perspective, on average, about $140. The reality is we're going to build these like little tiny custom homes. So one thing that we know is our little tiny custom homes that we're building are costing us about $155 to $160 per square foot. Now, the trim out items are still not going to be exactly the same as a custom home. So we can bank on the fact that we can build these for about $160 per square foot and still be at a very safe place. Now, traditional multifamily with all the amenities, parking requirements on the larger stuff is going to cost someplace closer to about $185 to $200 a square foot. But this is a simple property where improvements do not have to be met on the offsite as far as roadways, curbs, stopping lights, turning lanes, any of that stuff, because it's a small multifamily apartment complex. That's what I love about the small game in the multi-unit real estate perspective, is that I don't have a lot of expense offsite. So I can almost build this at the exact same cost as a custom home. So even though I'm going to put a slightly less into the amenities, I'm still going to have some commercial components that I'm going to have to require to be able to get this thing done, including fire sprinklers and a few other things. So if we say 160 a square foot, we build a nice product. We're going to go in at 32,000 square feet times 160. Okay. Now that's $5.1 million on the build cost is equal to $5,152,000. Okay. Now the land, we have to remember, the land is still only going to cost us about $400,000. Here's what you have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, is that the building, if you remember, had rent up here from the veterinarian clinic. We didn't underwrite that rent on the value of that property. It's still 2 lots. What we may do is sell that building off down the road later, or we'll go in and we'll just utilize it, and then we'll cash flow on the rents as well, and either add a premium for the amenities we put in there or just lease that spot long term, and then we have more revenue. But we're not even going to underwrite the building right now. All we're going to do is go in and underwrite a base cost of value on the asset. And one thing that we know is the land value is going to be sitting right in the neighborhood of $400,000. Okay, now we have some debt service. Here's what's cool. It's a local little product. It's a small loan. We're going to a local bank that's going to give us 6.9% interest on our money, okay? Now, we're going to go in, and let's say we take this down with the land. So now we go in, and we take $5,552,000. Okay, now this build will take us 1 year to do. It'll be a 10-month build. Let's just call it 12 months. So times 0.069%. That's $383,000. Now, the loan, ladies and gentlemen, is a stair-step loan, right? They don't just dump $5.5 million in my bank account when I go in there and I take this down. What they're going to land up doing is when I go in, I buy the land because I still don't even own the property. I have it tied up. I control the land. I have escrow money on the land. It's contractually mine. So I'm going in. I'm doing this. I don't have any debt service on the land. I'm not burning any money on the land. Everything that's happening right to this point is all based on my ability to get the density that I need. So there's a contingency placed on the land that I put in the purchase agreement saying, this is the terms of the loan, this is the terms of the purchase, this is the purchase price of what I'm doing. But it's all contingent on my ability to get a density of 24 units. That's what I underwrote it at. But we really want that 30 units or 28 units. So when we go in, I'm looking at this from a real revenue perspective. And I sit back and say, okay, I have to get this density or it's a no-go deal, right? So now we go in, we're committed, we're paying for our architects, our engineers, we've done our underwriting, and we're sitting back from a real perspective. And our real only debt service and liability stands under the construction time period. So let's say that it's a 12-month build and this loan is slowly starting to graduate as we build this property. We're going to typically take down about 30% of the debt service because of the stair-step loan process and what's called post 30. So that means that you do the work, 30 days later, post 30, you pay out your contractors. You do more work, you get a draw from the bank, post 30, you pay out your contractors. So all your contractors are getting paid out net 30, okay? Meaning 30 days later, they get paid, okay? So post 30, or what's called net 30 in the field of construction. Now, we go in, they tell us that 30% is what we're going to pay on our annualized debt service on this, but let's take it at 50% just to be conservative. 0.5, that means we have about $191,000 in debt service. Let's call it $200,000. You always have to consider debt service, guys. So now, total cost is equal to $5,752,000. Now, this is our total cost to build right here, guys. Okay, this is our total cost to build. It's $5,752,000. Now, can we afford to build it? Yes or no? Okay, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. Most people are just looking at this. You ain't done. You're not done, ladies and gentlemen. Most people say, yeah. No, you don't know yet. Here's why. Here's what happens, okay? I'm going to look at it from a worst case scenario perspective, okay? I'm looking at it here. What if things change with HUD? What if you can't get HUD approval? You can. You can get HUD approval. You just have to hire a consultant. It's going to cost you $100,000. Our cost is actually going to go up $100,000 because of HUD. Now, so let's factor that in. And let's say that we factor that in and it's still only worth $7.5 million. Let's just go in and say that 7.35, okay? So we know that the value is 7.35 million, okay? This is our value. Okay, now, the bank's not going to give us 100% of the value of that asset. They're going to give us probably 75% loan to value. So now that's where we need to go in and we need to look at this from a debt service perspective on a stabilized note. So now we go in and we go, okay, $7.35 million. I know that my total cost is right here and it's actually going to cost 5.8 because we have 100K for HUD. We're at least going to try to set it up for HUD, right? We're going to make sure that we're set up for success. But let's say if you go in and you hire a consultant, you pay that $100,000, you have to be brain dead to not get HUD because they're leading you through the process, right? So the only way that you wouldn't get approved is if you're brain dead because you have a consultant through HUD that's telling you exactly what you need to do. The cost to build is nothing more. It's all energy stuff. Our current codes comply with HUD. You just have to certify it. So everything needs that stamp of approval, stamp of approval, stamp of approval. So what you're basically paying for is a bunch of stamps of approval, and that's all you're really paying for. And somebody that's getting visual perspective going, okay, box check, yes. Box check, yes. Energy, box check, yes. ADA, box checked, yes. Okay, now when we go in, we look at this $7,350,000 times 0.75. That's 5.5, $500. This is your loan amount. Okay, look, guys. Cost me $5,800,000. I'm $300,000 in deficit. What happens? I have to come to the table with $300,000. I don't even get no money out. I just built that thing for free, and it cost me $300,000 to stabilize that asset just to get a loan. And this is what most people don't realize. They sit back and they look at it and they go, well, I can build it. How do you know? Like, how do you know you can build it? Can you? Not if you don't have $300,000, you can't get a stabilized loan at the end. So I did this on purpose. I want you guys to understand that just because you go in and build this, it's not always a home run. So you got to look at it from perspectives, right? So I said, okay, that's my worst case scenario. Now, I have two variables that I know are in my favor. I know that the high-end rents are $2,400 a month. I've got to meet that because now my net operating income goes in, my value goes up exponentially. But more important than that, if I can't reach that because market limits don't allow me to, I can always fall back on HUD. And when I fall back on HUD, and I spend that $100,000, we can go in and we only have $5.512 million, but look at our HUD value, 9.56. So on HUD, so we go in, we do a HUD loan. So when HUD is 9.56. So value, $9.56 million. This is through HUD, okay? Now HUD, here's what's cool about HUD. I can go in and get 80% loan to value. So now let's even underwrite it at 75%, but with HUD, I can get 80% loan to value. So if I go in, I get $9,560,000 times 0.75. That gives me a $7.17 million, okay? So now we go in, we can get a loan for $7,170,000. That's my loan. Here's what's cool about HUD. HUD doesn't care what my financial base is. My base is this right here. That $5.8 million is my base, okay? Banks today will not let you take out more than that amount on your loan because it's too much liability. The bank itself carries too much liability. They want that liability over your head, not theirs. So they don't want you to take any cash out of that asset at stabilization because of the liability perspective. What's cool is that HUD is a government-backed loan and they don't care what your basis is. They're going completely off of value, okay? So if you stabilize at a 4.5% interest rate and we underwrite this at a debt service ratio of 5% and we have this valuation, if we go in and we subtract out the $5,852,000, that's a $1.3 million cash out at refi, okay? Now, HUD typically won't underwrite that low, but HUD will usually go in and say, okay, we'll underwrite this at a 6% debt ratio. Okay, so HUD won't really go in a lot of times and do it at a 5% valuation. But what HUD will do, so let's look at HUD on a real perspective because this is our best case scenario now. I just went from our worst case scenario to our best case scenario based on a conservative rent of $2,000 a month. Okay, so we're still not on our best. We're at our best on the $2,000 a month rents. We still have the potential of getting $2,400 per unit, but we're not going to go that far. Okay, now let's go based off of just the $2,000 a month rents and let's go back in and say that HUD restricts the debt underwriting and restricts you to be at a 6% debt ratio. Okay, so now let's go back in and let's take our debt ratio at 6%. Okay, so now we're going to go back in. Our net operating income is 478. Okay, our debt ratio is 478. So our NOI is equal to 478K. Okay, now we go in, we divide this by 6%. So we take $478,000 times 0.06. That's going to give us a valuation of that's going to be $8 million. Okay, $8 million value. Now, HUD will give you 80%. So we're going to multiply this times 80% loan to value. So we're going to take that times 0.8. That's going to be $6,373,333. This is our loan amount. Okay, so now we're going to subtract this. We're going to take our cost to build, $5,852,000. Now we're going to take minus cash out, $521,333. Now, with all considered, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be our cash out, more realistic than anything, is $521 with HUD. Okay, now that's provided we cannot push those $2,400 a month rents. So conservatively speaking, it's $521,000 on the cash out. Why will I build this asset? Because that thing will produce income forever. If I stabilize that at a 6% interest rate and a value of $8 million, we go in and we go $8 million times 6%. That thing will cash flow every year, year over year, $480,000 in income. Even if I have a loan, $6,373,000 that we're servicing at 6%. So if we go in and we take $6,373,333 times 0.06 equals 382. So our mortgage payment is $382,000. We still make $100,000 net every year. So I make $100K net annually. That's cash flow. And that's our cash on cash return. That's cash on cash, guys. $100,000 every year. The asset is paying itself off. That's based on $2,000 a month rents. I have $100,000 in passive income, 521 that I got out. But the best part of this completely is that I have a valuation of $8 million. I take $400,000 of that asset and I take out the land because the IRS says you can't depreciate land. That means I take a $7.6 million tax deduction, $7.6 million cost segregation, take 80% bonus depreciation year one. Second I stabilize that asset, I go in and I take $7,600,000 times 0.8. I have a $6 million tax deduction on year one. That $6 million never expires. And until I have $6 million in net taxable income, I get to keep that. That'll take me a year or less. That'll take me less than a year to make. But that means that up to $6 million of my net taxable income, I don't have to pay federal income taxes on. Ladies and gentlemen, this is multifamily. This is why I love multifamily, and this is how you go out and compound your success. For more underwriting, more videos, more content just like this, so you can learn the different scenarios of large multifamily, small multifamily, single family builds, crushing profits in the single family space, multifamily space, considering current market conditions, leverage, stabilized values, and overall just going out and making a whole lot of shitloads of money. Click and subscribe to my YouTube channel, pound that thumbs up button, comment below, and go out and compound your success.